Hey everybody, welcome back to Kayfabe Critique. I'm David.
I'm Jason. Hey.
And so we're picking up, continuing our talks on the NWO. We talked about how, this was really built, Eric Bischoff coming in, becoming the president of WCW, creating Nitro, looking for a reality-based storyline, signing Hulk Hogan, bringing in Hall and Nash, the unbelievable debut of Scott Hall, the debut of Kevin Nash, just the realism, the violence, and just all the things that were different that had never been done before, building up to the Bash at the Beach, which is supposed to be Hall, Nash, and their surprise buddy versus Macho Man, Luger, and Sting. And of course, as they're on their way to the ring, being announced as Hall and Nash, being announced as the Outsiders, Mean Gene's asking them where the third man is. And they're telling him he's here, but we have enough to take him out with just us two.
Yep.
And so it just adds to the anticipation of building of who the third guy was going to be.
Yeah, it definitely adds to the anticipation, and it leaves you wondering, gosh, what could happen next? I mean, is Vince himself going to show up? Is he going to bring like a whole group from the WWF in? I mean, it's just going to be we're going to get to be bigger. Nobody knew.
Yeah, there were guys like we had mentioned, when it came to the curtain call, there were people in the crowd that recognized and knew that the clique existed, that these guys were friends, So there were some people at the time who thought Shawn Michaels may have been the third guy coming in, which at the time he was the WWE champion. So for people to believe that he may be jumping over and coming in would have really thrown things off.
Right, because you didn't know contracts, you didn't know anything about any of this stuff. I mean, Bret Hart was gone at this time. It's like, maybe it was going to be him, who knows?
And so of course we know, and we alluded to in our previous episode, that Hulk Hogan is going to be the third man. But, behind the scenes, the initial talk was they didn't know if Hogan was going to be the third man initially. Just a year or so before this, we had talked about, Hogan was getting booed. And so Bischoff went to talk to him about turning heel then, and he kind of showed Bischoff the door. He really wasn't interested.
Yeah, he wasn't interested, and I think he was legitimately concerned because he was and still does a lot of work with like Make-A-Wish, and he had been like a babyface since like 83, 84. He had been a babyface, and he'd come in as a heel, and it really didn't work as well as him being a babyface did. So, I mean, he had some legitimate concerns. Like, Hulk Hogan was still a draw making movies at this time. I mean,
and he was still a merchandising machine.
Yeah. I mean,
and so definitely got concerns on that part, but what if, when Bischoff first approached him at that time about turning heel, so a year prior to the NWO, what if Hogan would have turned heel then? Would it have been as big?
No.
I don't think so either. I don't know if it would have pulled the attention that it did. I think the foundation of what Hall and Nash were doing by themselves is what made Hogan's heel turn bigger.
Right.
So I think had he turned heel in 95, I don't think it would have been as big. And not only that, but what would wrestling have looked like, because we wouldn't have ended up with an NWO.
Yeah, I mean, and they even kind of teased a little bit darker Hulk Hogan. I guess it was kind of like Spider-Man in the black suit at Halloween Havoc but they did it with monster trucks, which was where the business was at that moment. So, no, it wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have worked nearly as well.
And so then one of the other things now, kind of getting up to the time we're speaking of, was if Hulk doesn't want to do it, the talk was Sting. Had Sting been the third man, would the NWO have worked?
It would have worked. However, it would have taken it longer to get over, I believe, because of the fact, because for them to pull Sting, who's the franchise of WCW, over to the NWO, you could play into the fact that Hogan came in and Sting had been carrying the company on his back, but when Hogan came in, they just kind of shoved Sting to the back of the title picture, and everything was Hogan, 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 and I was a good soldier, and this is what I got, so I decided to roll with these guys. It could have worked, but with the ties Hogan had to the WWF, and with the ties that Hall and Nash had to the WWF, it wouldn't have played into the takeover line nearly as well.
Yeah, and I think it could have worked. I don't think it would have been as big or as successful. Mm-hmm. So with Sting turning heel was not going to bring back wrestling fans. Mm-hmm. It wasn't going to pull in casual wrestling fans. Where Hogan turning heel, you had guys that hadn't watched since the 80s or early 90s, right, all of a sudden now who are adults are now watching wrestling to see this. Sting wouldn't have pulled that power. And then you had casual fans who, I had some guys that I knew had never watched wrestling, mm-hmm, but yet when all this stuff started going on and they started watching it, it was so different, it was so cool, mm-hmm, they started watching and wearing NWO shirts.
Yeah, I mean, having Hulk Hogan do it, it's like you're watching something and something unexpected happens. It makes you like, for lack of a better word, say, oh shit. Or you spit your beer out or whatever, you spit your drink out, because you're just like, it just makes your jaw drop. Like, just like with something, an unexpected twist just happens. That's what Hulk Hogan turning heel gave you, because you knew him as training, saying your prayers, eating your vitamins. You knew him as like this larger than life hero, and now he turns heel.
Yeah, and it's done in such a way that, like you said, it was that shocking moment. It was the moment people did not expect to see, and to the point where the crowd went crazy. Initially, the crowd cheers because they're thinking he's coming down to help WCW, mm-hmm, but then he drops the leg on Savage. The outsiders jump in the ring. You find out he's with them, and they start throwing beer cans and drinks into the ring. Something that I had never seen before.
I had never seen that, and it just shows the emotional pull that wrestling has. I mean,
especially in that character of Hogan had.
Yeah, and I mean, I believe the announcer said that there were kids crying and stuff like that. I don't think that was just a line. I really believe that there were kids probably crying, and there probably were people trying to take their Hulk Hogan merchandise back to the merchandise stand at that moment, because it was just that shocking.
Yeah, and so you have a shocking story with the feel of reality and the sense of violence. And again, we're talking about stuff that was so different,
yeah,
that had ever been done in wrestling, and it just continues to add to the build of the NWO.
It absolutely adds to it. And I mean, think about this. I was thinking about this moment because we got Mean Gene right there, and we recently lost him. And think about the tie that Mean Gene had to Hulk Hogan and WWF.
All the way back to AWA.
Actually, back to AWA with Hogan. Just think about how long that relationship was. I mean, just another little subtle thing. Having anybody else in the ring at that moment would have taken away from it. But having Gene Okerlund in the ring for just like another major Hulk Hogan moment, again, it may have seemed subtle, but it helped get it over.
Yeah, and that's what I think you hit it right on the head there with these subtle moments that are small but were huge. Mm-hmm. Mean Gene, the way he conducted this interview.
Yeah.
You had the emotional ties to Hogan, you had the history with Hogan, but him pointing out the trash in the ring and saying, this is what represents you now if you're going to hang around with the likes of these two.
I mean,
And so you had Mean Gene kind of putting it over, selling it. Tony Schiavone was doing great on the mic here.
yeah.
And doing an unbelievable job and from the announcer standpoint to really sell this and put it over as well.
Yeah.
And then another just a little subtle thing was, Bischoff, as he's talking through it with Hogan on the way out there, it just came to him, New World Order.
Yeah.
And so, of course, anybody who knows about, when you think of from a conspiracy theory standpoint of what the New World Order is, and then you think about applying it to wrestling, that it's going to change everything.
Well,
Kind of prophetic in a way.
I think they definitely did that. I mean, I just still think about, just again, the reality-based stuff. The way Schiavone sold it with Hulk Hogan, you can go to hell.
Yeah.
You could hear and feel disappointment. He's talking about the end of Hulkamania. He talked about it the way I would talk, the way I kind of felt like when Kobe or Jordan retired. With that level of emotion, they all sold it.
Mm-hmm.
And they made you feel they were speaking like they were the voice of the fans and the disappointment and the anger.
Yeah, and the trash hits the ring. And have you ever seen a more emotional or more memorable debut for a group or an individual?
No. And I don't think you ever will, because again, you don't have that element of surprise in wrestling anymore. Mm-hmm. Unless you just refuse to read spoilers or anything like that, you don't get that element of surprise.
Yeah, and it would be hard in this day and age to carry on something for, in this case, was more than a month. It was about 6 weeks after Hall's debut, mm-hmm. to be able to carry on something this long without figuring out ahead of time who the third guy was.
Yeah.
So, so after this moment, the NWO is off and running, and we start to see more things from the NWO carrying all the stuff that we had never seen before, like the backstage brawl here at the MGM Grand, where Kevin Nash lawn darts Rey Mysterio into the trailer.
Ray.
They're attacking people with baseball bats, and people think it's real. They think it's a real riot, and the police are called and security's called.
Yeah, because they're doing their show at Disney this whole summer, and poor Ray. I still think about that moment, and it makes me laugh. But again, we hadn't seen this level of violence, and this is two people doing this.
Yeah, and this scene carried on for a while. Like after they're gone, after the outsiders jump in the limo and they take off, this scene carries on for a while with the paramedics on site and people coming out to look at them. Mm-hmm. And it's just adding into that realistic feel that just hadn't existed in wrestling before.
Right, and you see Hall and Nash on camera, and it's kind of like, I believe the announcers were given the perception, it's like, was it just those two? Because the way they were doing things, they were so covert almost. Mm-hmm. You had never seen stuff like that. Because most of the time when wrestlers jump people, they jump them in the ring during a match.
Yes.
Or during a backstage interview.
And so we're continuing to build here with NWO and doing it in ways that have never been done before. And it's just gathering attention and pulling in the ratings. And it's leading to, we're seeing some of the vignettes like in the black and white that had never been done before. Them taking over the announcer's table. Hogan, prior to the NWO shirts actually existing, wearing what looks like the spray painted logo on a shirt.
Yeah. And this moment right here, this was like the first WCW pay-per-view I'd ever ordered, because prior to that, I'd order like WrestleManias before, stuff like that. But ordering this pay-per-view and seeing Hulk Hogan win the WCW World Title and spray paint the belt, no one had ever spray painted a belt And I don't think anyone since has ever spray painted a belt.
Right, so that's Hog Wild 96, and talking about, you know, just the field of the NWO kind of disrespecting the history of WCW by spray painting the belt.
Right. Again, playing into that, your company isn't on the level of the boys up north, because we still, I mean, he's still like, they still have this perception of these are these dudes from up north.
Yeah. So, as we're bringing this little segment to a close, we'll also end it with shortly after this, Ted DiBiase, the former $1 million man from WWE, shows up in the crowd and signals that he is number 4. So stick around and we'll be right back with the NWO in our next episode.
All right.